Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Rentman webinar. Today's webinar will be about how to best manage sales and installation jobs inside Rentman. And this is the third and last webinar of a series we've done recently of advanced webinars. The first one being Meet the Expert with fellow Rentman user Colin Meyer, who talked to us about his workflows and how he uses Rentman in his production company. And then we had last week's webinar about instead advanced time registration and crew financials that Bogdan talked to us about. Both those webinars, you can find the recordings of those webinars on our website, rentman.io/webinars. And on that page, you can also find the previous webinars we've done on the improved interface. The ones on the improved interface, if there's something that you wish to see on how it works on a certain module, if you open them on YouTube, you will also find that we have timestamped them for your convenience, so you can just jump to the clips that most interest you. But let's talk about today's webinar. Today, we'll be talking about how to best manage sales and installation jobs in Rentman. Before we get into how the webinar is going to work, a little bit about myself. I am Axel, and I do customer support both for English-speaking customers as well as for Italy. And I am joined in this webinar in the background by my colleagues Parker and Bogdan, who I believe many of you already know. Let's talk a little bit about how this webinar is going to work. Since there's quite a few of us, you are in listen and view only mode, which means you cannot talk to us directly. However, for all your questions, you can use the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. There will be Parker and Bogdan who will be answering your questions. If there are questions that are interesting for all the participants, we will also discuss them directly during the webinar. So I will answer those questions. And if certain questions are perhaps very specific about a certain workflow that you follow, it is possible that we will be answering you by email. But in any case, we will be answering all your questions. This session is being recorded, and the recording of this webinar will be made available to you on YouTube, on our blog, and via email since you signed up for the webinar. And again, feel free to use the Q&A section below at any moment to ask us questions. And in that section, you can also find some relevant links, such as the page where you can find the other webinars, as well as our support center. The agenda for today's webinar is as follows. We'll start by talking about the differences between the rental and the sale items in Rentman, because of course they have a slightly different behavior, which then is reflected also on how they actually work in the system. Then we will discuss the three most common types of sale items and how to best handle those inside Rentman. And then we will actually be doing a sales job together and an installation job together. During the webinar itself, and also at the end, there will also be space for questions. This will be the questions that we'll be answering out loud directly during the webinar. Right now, there's no questions, I believe, so we can jump right in and go on Rentman. So let's start by talking about very quickly about what sales and install jobs are. I'm sure many of you, if not most of you, already know about what they are, but the main difference between what a rental project is and what instead a sales or an installation project is that the equipment that you deliver will not be returned to your warehouse. And by default, we do not have a vast amount of them already available in our warehouse. And another difference is that the date for an installation or a sales job is not necessarily known up front. So you need to be able to make your project inside Rentman, but only at a second moment, at a later time, will you be actually inserting the times of when this project is actually going to take place. But again, to be able to talk about these projects, first we need to see how sale items and rental items are different in Rentman. I have two of them already open right here. These are actually the same item. I have these speakers. One is the rental version, one is the sales version. This here is the rental version, which also has a picture, whereas I forgot to put it in the sale one, but they're the same item. The first thing that we can see that is different is the fields here in the financial part of the item. Indeed, the two items have different fields because, of course, this being a rental item has a rental price, whereas the sale item has a sales price. And it will also be different here. For example, there is the purchase price for the sale item, where is a sub-rental cost for the rental item. These two fields, especially the sub-rental cost for the rental item and the purchase price for the sale item, is also what is going to determine your costs inside the project. So these are two important fields. Another difference that the two have is how the stock is managed. For a rental item, we can choose, of course, if we want to calculate the stock of this item by in bulk. So we enter the quantity manually here in the stock tab, or if we want to track this by serial number. For a sale item, we do not have this choice. We instead have a different type of choice, which is to track the stock or to exclude from stock tracking. That is because for a sale item, we do not have the option of creating serial numbers. So it can only be a bulk stock that we can manage here from the stock tab. And here we can see that this item that I already used yesterday as a negative current stock. And this is to show another and perhaps the most significant difference between rental items and sale items. And that is that sale items, when they are booked through the warehouse, are actually taken out of stock, because a sale item, as we were saying before, is not expected to come back to your warehouse because, of course, you sold it. This is, of course, not something that is true, because I also deleted this project in the meantime, so I can reset the situation and we can start from a zero stock. For the sale items, one thing that we can do is that a feature that we do have is that we have the critical stock. So we can set up a stock level that is the minimum of the stock that we want to have at all times. For those of you that worked in the old interface, you might know that in the dashboard there was a widget that warned you when the critical stock of an item, of a sale item, which generally was a consumable, was reached. On the improved interface, as far as I know, and Parker, Bogdan, correct me if I'm wrong, we do want to bring this widget back. But for the moment, one way in which you can use this feature of the critical stock to keep it clear at all times, if you have to restock on something, is that you can add to your overview of the items this column, which of course you can do by going on the column header, and then you click on edit columns. You can add this column here, critical stock, and have it side by side with the quantity calculated. So already at a glance, you can tell if the quantity calculated something is less than the critical stock should be. There is also another difference, and this is the last one between sale items and rental items, is that when doing a rental project, you will know that for different items, and depending on the number of days that they are planned, the items have a factor. And the factor is a way to give discounts for items that are on location or that are booked in a project for a certain amount of time. For example, it is on location for 3 days, but I will instead have a factor of 1.5, which means I will give this discount to the customer. For sale items, this does not apply. Indeed, the factor of the sale items is always 1. Before going in the project, I think it's also useful to talk about 3 general types of sale items that we will be discussing throughout the webinar. The first one is an item that you are normally renting. So you use it all the time to rent it, and then you decide to sell it. The second type is instead an item that is also rental, but that you also sell new. So this is, for example, let's say you have a microphone, an SM58 that you do rent, but then you also have a number of those same microphones, SM58, that you also sell brand new straight from the shelf. And finally, another type of sale item that we will be talking about is that of new items. So items that you purchase, and this is especially the case for an installation job. There is, of course, a fourth type of sale item, which is a consumable, but we will not be talking about it much during this webinar, because a consumable is simply something that you can track here in Rentman by creating, yes, a sale item, so that when you send it on location through the warehouse module, its stock gets decreased, so you know when you have to restock, and you can track through the critical stock. But it's not necessarily interesting for the purpose of this webinar. Now that we've done this introduction on sale items, we can talk about how to create a project, a sale project, whether this be a regular sale project, as in I sell this to the customer who comes to pick it up, or if it's an installation project. And we will be looking at both of those a little bit more in depth later in the webinar. To work with sale projects in Rentman, this is actually a function about that, which is the projects without times. These projects behave differently than normal rental projects. And we can already see this difference, for example, here in the projects module. Here you will see that I'm looking at the projects for this month. However, if a sales project doesn't have times, it will not show up in this view. This is because this view is based on the times of the project, the dates of the project, and not having the dates, it cannot show up anywhere. However, we have a section for the projects that do not have a date, which is this project here, which is this section here without date. So here we can keep track of projects that we do without times. Another part where this will not appear, not having dates, is my schedule, for example. Because in my schedule, this of course will show the projects based on the date, and a sales project, at least in the first step, so when it's first created, doesn't have times. So it will also not show up here, at least until the quotation is sent and signed by the customer, after which it becomes the project is confirmed, so it can be given times and become a normal project, which will then appear here, and also, for example, here. In this section without date, this poses also another, let's say, issue that, however, is easily solved, which is how to best keep track of projects, of sale projects that do need attention. Because for a normal project, I can be, this is this visualization here, and I can, of course, use the project progress icons to easily keep an eye on what I should do regarding, for example, the equipment, if there's a quotation, an invoice, the crew, and so on. However, the fact that the projects without times are here, it means that if this is my regular overview, because maybe I do more rental projects than sale projects, then it's possible that I do not often pay attention to this section. So I need to, yes, go here. But for example, let's say that I want to make sure that a quotation that I sent for a sale project, so that sale doesn't have times, because I don't know if it will be happening, and if it does, when it will be happening. I want to still make sure that I keep an eye on it, for example, in terms of expired quotation. If the quotation is expired, then I can cancel the project, or if it's signed. One way I can do this is, of course, by going to without date and checking the project progress. For example, here I can see that a pending quotation has expired. Another way to do it, and this is true not only for sale projects, but also for all types of projects, is to create presets. For example, I have created a preset here. And this has the filters active that it has an expired quotation and the project is pending. It's pending because, of course, when I do generate a quotation, the project status will change to pending. And expired quotations, because this way I can filter those projects, just those projects that need immediate attention because the quotation has expired. In this current view, you don't really see the need, perhaps, for this preset because I only have one such project. But if I were running multiple projects without times at the same time, then a preset such as this one would definitely come in handy. This said, I think we can already jump into how to make a sales project. And a sales project, the idea that we're going to use here is that we get a call from someone who also wants to start in the AV business, for example. And to get started, they wish to buy some of the equipment that they need from us. We know the expectations that they have for the items, and so we decide to sell them some secondhand rental equipment that we have, as well as something that we do have and we do normally rent, but we also decide to sell as new. So we can do this, and we can do the entire flow together. Let's start with a project. In the creating of the project, we will start with the project without times, which is, of course, the sales one. So let's select this project, and we will call it sale project. You can, of course, create a project type for sales. One comes already by default by creating a Rentman demo, so I'm going to use this one. But you can make one your own depending of what types of sales projects you're doing. And of course, for all of them, you can give them default letterhead, templates for your documents, invoice moments, and terms of conditions. I'm going to use this one. And as always, we want to put the client. So the client will be Rentman, let's say. And the location The location is something that this depends on how the sale project is going to be. If the sale is happening at your warehouse, so your customers are coming directly to your warehouse to pick up the equipment, you can also leave this empty. Otherwise, if you have to bring the equipment somewhere, of course, here you would put the location of where you have to bring the equipment. In this moment, let's say that this is at our warehouse, so we will leave this empty. I put the location, and here already there is a difference between a rental project and a sale project. Since this doesn't have times, I can already save here. Whereas on a rental project, I would have to go to the time schedule and insert those times. Here, this is empty, so I can just save right away. Now it is time to input the equipment. And to input the equipment, regardless of what type of sale item it is that you're trying to sell, if it's one of those three that we were talking about, if it's something you were renting and now you decide to sell, or if it's something that you rent but you also have new, or if it's something entirely new, there is in general two ways to handle it. And the best way to handle this depends on how often you intend to manage these items. Let me explain why. Let's just add an equipment group. I'll just call it new equipment group for a moment and save. So if I have, for example, let's go back to the equipment and to the active speakers. You will see here that in active speakers, I have two folders. One is just active speakers, another one is for sale. And they have the same items. So I have these three here that are rental and these three here that are sale. If the sale item that I'm selling is something that I will sell more times than just the one project that I'm doing right now, and something so that I want to reuse and to more easily keep track of, the easier way to handle it, especially if you already rent this item, is simply to select the item that you decide to sell. You can duplicate it. We need to make sure to change what the equipment is for from rental and to sale, and to adjust the prices as needed. Because of course, you see that in changing, I have a rental price that is 45. I change it to sale, it becomes a sales price of 45, which is probably not what I want to sell it for. So I need to make sure that I adjust these fields. And in doing so, for example, if this was rental, I know the list price is what I paid it when I bought it. So this is, for example, something that I can just move this list price here to sale to the purchase price, because this is then what will determine the costs and so also the margins for the project. Of course, I might decide that since this was secondhand, I was already renting it, I do not want to sell it as a full price. So I do not want the purchase price to be the full list price, rather, because I've already been renting it for 1 year. So it has already earned me something. So I can want to use this to calculate my costs and put something lower rather than a full on list price. Once I've decided on the various prices, what I can do is that, of course, I can indicate the stock, what it should be. If this is something that is already available to me, I can just correct the current stock and I can make it however much I want to remove from the rental one. Let's say that I want 2 of these. If instead is something that is in the future, and this is, for example, very useful for installation jobs in which maybe I don't have the items that I want to use for the installation, but if this gets accepted, I want to order them, then I can schedule a stock movement. So I can schedule a stock mutation in the past. I can know, for example, I order this, it will arrive on the 28th of February. So I can do the stock movement in the future so that the stock of this item will change depending on the time and the date that I indicated here. Once I've done this, let's say I'm happy with what I've done here. I've already done it before, so I'm not going to save, but you can simply save. And what remains to be done is simply to go back to the rental item. And here we want to also adjust the stock because, for example, I took 2 of those out of the stock of the rental items because now I will be selling them. So I can just change the correct stock. The new stock will be 6, and I can give the name, and I can give a description. Like I changed this to be a sale item because I will sell it in this project. So this is what you would do if this is something that you will be selling again or that you want to keep track of. And this you can do both if the item is rental that you were already using, so it's second-hand if you go to sell it, or if it's something that you both rent and you also sell, but in both ways it's something new. Because you can also always create first a rental item and then you simply duplicate it or rather, you can also just add the equipment and make it directly a sale item. This is however you prefer to work on this, really. The third option, and this you can do directly on the project, is instead useful if this item that you are selling for this project, you will never use again. So you have no interest in keeping it in your equipment database. In this case, then you can proceed just with a temporary item. So you can go here to the three dots, which in Rentman is always the More Actions button. You can click here and you can select Add Temporary Item. This can be, of course, a sale item. You give it the sales price it should have, the purchase cost it should have, because again, this will calculate the costs. Let's say that this is 100 purchase cost, and I will sell it at 120, for example, as well as the ledger. And we'll just call this same sale item. Let's say this is just a general sale item. So we added this, we know this is temporary. And even though it's temporary, this will still show up in our statistics. So we can keep track accurately also what we're selling. But if we look at the financial, we will see that we already have the costs here, which is what the purchase price was for this item. So here on the project, we are planning the equipment. Let's say that we also plan one of each of all these three items. So we can add it to the location. I don't want any of the accessories. So this is all for sale. And of course, this being a sale project means that, at least in this case, the customer will come to my warehouse directly to pick up the equipment as soon as the quotation is accepted. So I do not need any crew. I can skip this. For the moment, I do not need any additional costs. So I can simply go to the financial tab and I can create a quotation for this customer. This is always, you add the quotation, you choose, I see the customer is correct, the project is correct, the number. If you want, and if this is something that you can do, depending on, of course, also on regulations on quotation numbers, you can decide, for example, to have a different number series for sale projects, but this is up to you. If this is the same, you can just leave it here. So it's inserted automatically according to your number series. And then we go and we generate the quotation. I'm going to use an extended template, default letterhead, and I can just go ahead and generate. Unless it does so, I will stop 1 second and drink a little bit of water.
Wow, that's a beautiful quotation, Axel. Nice job. If you're taking questions now, I thought you were in the equipment tab just now, and I was wondering if you could show a way to only show a certain type of equipment, for instance, sales items or rental items. Felix
Yes.
Timote is wondering how he can never browse sales items when he's doing a rental project.
Yeah. So in the equipment tab of the project, or on the
that's correct, yeah. In the equipment tab of the project, he wants to only see like one type of equipment when he's planning his equipment. And I thought maybe tags might be.
Yeah, there's various ways to do this. I think the best way would be tags, as you said. So if for this items, let's say, these are the sale ones, what I can do is that I can add tags to them. So I can tag it sale, and I can save. And let's say instead these are 3. And I'm just gonna give this as an example on these 6 items, but of course you can do this on the entire database. You can do this in bulk, so you don't have to do it for all of them. Whereas here would be, for example, rental. And save here. And then on the project, as you're planning, and this, by the way, you can do with any type of tag. So not only rental sale, but also if you have custom tags and you want to hide something, then you can simply select a tag and you can choose that the result must comply with one of the selected tags. For example, I only want to see items that have rental. I can select, and this will filter my results to only show the items that have rental as the tag. And of course, vice versa, you can do the same, but the opposite. So if you are doing a sales project, then you can just select everything that is tagged sale, and you can put it here. Another way to do it would instead be, for example, with the folder structure, like I've done. So I have a structure for sale. You can, of course, also have a root folder. So like audio would be here, and have one that is inside sale. So if you're doing a rental project, you can decide to collapse it so you don't even see it. But again, there's various ways to reach this result. And I think tags is perhaps the easiest one.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. Let's go back to our project. We did the quotation. And of course, if you have more questions, send them over and we will be answering them later, of course. But we've done this quotation. We can, of course, we can send it to the client. Say, I will be sending this email. I won't send it now because I don't think this client actually has an email address, a real email address inserted. So then we'll get notifications that it can send. But let's say that we sent this sale item. We sent it, and the customer either signed it or he got back to us, and he tells us to go ahead with the project. This means that if the client signs it with the digital signing button on the quote, the project gets confirmed automatically. In this case, let's say that he did sign it. I will confirm it manually. So now that the project is confirmed, there's two ways to go from here. One way to do it, if you have the sale items that you have created them in the equipment module in Rentman, like I've done. You can also just give the items to your client, and then you go and you change the stock of these items that were in the project. This is something that is possible, but you have to do it manually for each item, which also means that there could be more space for mistakes or errors. So it's not something that I would personally recommend. What I would suggest is instead, now that the project is confirmed and you know when the customer will come and pick up the items, is to add times to the project. So far, the project does not have times, so I will only see it here in the without date section. But what we can do now that it is confirmed is we can add those times. So we can go to the time schedule. I can add only one time, which is the pickup. And let's say that the pickup is tomorrow at 8. Until tomorrow at 8. So I can already save here. Next thing I need to do is I need to connect this equipment to the times that I've set up for the project. So I can either select the group and click edit, or I can double click on the equipment group. And then you click on usage period, and I connect it from the period that is in the time schedule. Planning period will be the same. Okay, this done. Now that the project does have times, you will see everything went red, because now that the project has times, then the availability of the items is checked. This first one that I made is a temporary item, which means it's not in my database. And as a result, it's always in shortage. These instead are items that I made, but I didn't give a stock to, because if we go, it's still at 0. So it's normal that you will show in shortage. Of course, if they were a real item, so they have a stock, let's say I have 5 of this item that I want to sell, then they will not be in shortage. They would just be in white as they were before. But regardless, now that I have times and the project is confirmed, what this means is that I can handle it through the warehouse. So I can go to book equipment, or here go to the warehouse and select the right project. I will do it from here because it's a little bit quicker. So I can do book equipment, and this can also my warehouse employee, for example, can do it directly from the warehouse, of course, also from the app. They can simply book out the sale items when the customer come to pick them up. So I will be booking these items on location. And this is a sale item, a sale project, I'm sorry, as we said. So this will not be returning. So what we can do is we can simply change the status to returned, which in Rentman terms means the project is closed, is done. And I can save. This is done. This project has been correctly concluded and finished. And we can tell of course, what's remaining is that the customer actually has to pay us. That depends on your terms and conditions. Very important part of the projects, of course. But what this does on the sale item terms is that since we did this through the warehouse, you will notice that now the quantity calculated for everything here is -1. Is because automatically the stock of the sale item is changed when it gets handled through the warehouse. This is also the reason why I would recommend giving the project times, even though it's an extra step, because then being able to do it through the warehouse means that the stock changes are done automatically and there's less possibility of error instead of doing, for example, of doing it manually. And this done, the project is finished. So this would be my sole project. I think maybe we can stop for a second. I see there are a couple questions. Is there something for me, Parker? If not, I'll go in the installation job.
I think you can continue, and we'll hit these later in the script in the webinar flow. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Well, then let's talk about the installation job, which is the second half of what we want to talk about in this webinar. And you will see that it's very, very similar to a sales job, except that it also has crew planning involved. And an example for what we mean when we talk about an installation job would be, let's say, an auditorium that needs a new audio system. And we want to be the ones who provide it for them. So like a sale item, of course, like a sales project, of course, it starts with somebody wanting something from us. But in this case, we probably need to make a quotation first of what we would do with this auditorium, because there might be a race, quote unquote, to see who gets this job from the auditorium. So we want to make something catchy, and we want to make, of course, a good offer. How can we do this? Again, we can start from the beginning and we can make a new project so we look at it together. So we go to our G project and the beginning is just the same. So we start with a project without times because we know that this auditorium needs a new installation. We don't know when this project will be because we also don't know yet if we are the ones who are going to win this job. But let's say auditorium, we give it a name, auditorium audio system. Like before, you can have a different project type. I'm going to put sale again, but you might have one that's called installation, for example, if this is something that you do often, so it merits having its own project type. And we're going to put the client. In this case, it's again Rentman. Rentman needs a new audio system. So the Rentman auditorium needs a new audio system. And in this case, we actually do need the location because we will have to physically go there, or at least our technicians, we will have to go there and set up this new audio system for the client if we do get the job. So in this case, the location will be the same as the client. We can save. Like before, no time schedule yet because we don't know. And here we will go and like we did before, we will plan the items that we will need. Here, we can do this again in two ways, like we've discussed before. So we can create a temporary item, or if we already know what we wish to have and what we will be selling, what we'll be installing, and we might need it in the future, we can duplicate the items like we did before here in the equipment module. And then what we can do is that once we get the job, which we hopefully do, for example, let's say this full range speaker, this is part of our project. We get the job. What we can do is that we can schedule the mutation, the stock movements in the future for when we will need this item to then go and install it according to the job. So we can just put this in the future. Let's say it will be on the 20th, and I'm going to need 5 of these for the installation. So the stock of this will change from that day. But let's close this parenthesis. Let's go back to the equipment. Like before, we can add a new equipment group, which can be the audio system. And like before, I will plan these 3 items that I do intend to sell, the audio system without any accessories because I don't need them right now. And please forgive me if this doesn't make sense from the AV perspective, just to show you the workflow. But this is an installation, unlike the project from before. So another thing that we need is probably the tools to actually do this project. So for our technicians to then go and install the things. So we can do another equipment group, which is tools. And we can look at our tools, which could be, might be rental items. So one thing that we could do in terms of tools, in this case, I don't believe I have rental items ready. Okay, let's see. So I will just plan some consumables here, but which are also in this case are sale items. But this could be rental items, and of course we don't want our client for the installation to pay for the tools because those are internal expenses. It's not something that the client should see or should pay. So what we can do is that we can select the equipment group. We can double click again, and we can exclude it from the price calculation. So you will see this now, it's strike through, which means that this 3250 will not be billed to the client. And in our document template, we can also choose to not display on the equipment of the quotation or the invoice, to not display items that are excluded from the price calculation. Just a second, sorry. Okay, so let's say we are done with the equipment. What we can do next, of course, is we have to plan the crew and transport. And like before, we do know what we will need for this installation. We do not know when. So to plan already the crew to get an indication of what this will cost us, what we can build the customer, we can use this ungrouped functions, which is already there in any project that you create. So we can just let's say that we need a sound technician, and then we need another technician, and this will be used for the installation. I know I don't know when this project will happen, but what I do know is I have an estimate of how long my technicians will take to then install these items. So what I can do is here where it says usage period, like before, I can select and edit, or I can double click on the usage period. I will double click because it's a little bit quicker. And I know that, for example, this will take 4 hours to them to set up. So I can already put a duration there. And in the same vein, I can do here, I know also this technician. In this case, you will see it has no time specified, whereas this before already had the duration. If it has no time specified, we can still insert a duration. We just need to select down here because we don't know the exact times. So we can enter duration, and again, it's 4 hours. And here you can already see that something different happened. This one before, it had a certain cost and price, and it remained the same. This is because this activity that I have is a fixed rate, so it doesn't matter for how many hours this activity is planned, the cost will be the same, and so will the price. Whereas this technician has an hourly rate, so by inserting a duration, I got the costs and the price depending on what the hourly rate was set for, both in terms of price and costs, of course. So this is what I have right now. I'm good with the functions. I plan the equipment. The next thing that I have to do is simply make a quotation. So like before, I will add a quotation. Like before, I will choose the extended view because I want to show my, hopefully, client all the breakdown of the costs that will be in this installation. And like before, I can send the quotation directly by email. Like in the example that we've done before, the clients actually liked our quotation, which means that they accepted it. So I can confirm the project, or if they signed it, again, it's confirmed automatically. And whereas for the sale project before, the adding of times was optional, and I would say recommended, but from me, just because it's easier to access the warehouse. In this one is actually needed to add the times because we physically need to go somewhere to do this installation. So we also need to communicate to our technicians, of course, when do they have to go there to do the installation. So here again, we can add times, which can be, for example, it can be the travel to, and this is again tomorrow. Tomorrow will be a busy day. It's tomorrow from 8 to 9, let's say. And then I can have another time, which is the installation. And this will take tomorrow from 9. We said it's 4 hours. That was our estimate for the technicians. So it's 9 to 1. And then we can have a third time, which is travel from, to get back, of course, to our warehouse once this job is done. It's still tomorrow, and this will be from 1 until 2. Okay, I can save. And like before, I can give the items sometimes. For the equipment groups, I'm sorry. For the audio system, it doesn't really matter what times I give them, because this will be sale items, so they will remain on location, which means, and it will be detracted from my stock. So it doesn't really matter what times I give them, so long as there is a time so I can handle them through the warehouse. So, but just to be correct in what we're doing, I can set it up from, let's say it's the installation. Starts and ends with installation. The tools instead, if these were rental items so that I need to accurately track the availability of, what I would want to do is to give them a time in terms that is the entire time that they are out of the warehouse. This would be, for a rental project, is normally the planning period. In this case, I did not set up a planning period, a default one, so I'll do it manually. So I want them unavailable from the start of the travel to, which is my earliest time, until the end of the travel from, which is my latest time. So I'm sure that they are marked as unavailable, and I cannot book them anywhere else in this time because they will not be physically in my warehouse. This done, I need to do the same for the crew and transport, and this I can do in 2 ways. Actually, at this stage, I can do it from here. So I can simply add the function group, and I can call it whatever I want. This can be also with different times. For example, I might have the travel or the transport, let's say. The transport, so I have one that is from travel to, and it ends with travel to. And then I can have another one that's, let's say, on transport. And this will be for the way back. So travel from. And on both of them, I can plan, for example, a certain truck that I need. I want to put this in transport, and this one here. For the crew, we can do the same. So we can do another function group, then we can call crew, for example. And for them, I also know that I will need them from the beginning of the transport, because they're going to go together with the items until the end of the travel from. And I have this crew function here. So what I can do is I can simply select the functions and I can drop them in the project. Another thing I could do, I'm not gonna save, is do this directly from the crew planner. So in the crew planner here, now the project has times. If this did not have times, I could simply click here where it says crew members, and I could see the functions not scheduled. Here, for example, you see I have another install job that was already in the system that doesn't have a time frame, and it has some activities on it. What I can do, I can simply drag it and drop it in the here in the timeline, which will give them a time according to where I drop it. But in this case, we've already done it from here, so this is already fine. The next thing we need to do is we need to schedule the actual crew. And like before, we can do this from the crew planner, where let's actually quickly go back there, where I can select here something, for example, a sound technician, and I can plan who I want to be on the sound technician. And here, if there is the availability of the crew members that's been inserted, you can of course see who is available and who is unavailable. And if this is something that needs more explanation, I would suggest to look at to watch the webinar we recently done about the crew planning, which goes a lot more in depth just about this. But if you don't want to do it from the crew planner, you can also do it here from the crew scheduling. So you can select who should be scheduled. Let's say I see Mike here is available, so I can schedule Mike. And I see for this, said I will schedule Tom. Like we saw for the items, also for the crew members, you can search by tags. So if I given somebody the tag of sound technician, then I can see that that person is the person to plan on this project. And the last step would be the transport planning, which I need to do for the way there. So I will plan truck 001, clearly a real truck, on both of these functions for the transport. Once this is done, this is now a normal project. So like now it's not even going to be in the project without dates. As you can see, it's no longer there. It is rather a project that will appear in the current week. As you can see it here, the auditorium audio system, and the same for the SIL project that we did before. It also, here it is. So I can handle it like a normal project, which means I can go to the warehouse when it's time to actually pack the items. This we said is tomorrow, I believe. So we can change the date here to tomorrow or here from the view. And we can then proceed to book the project as we would normally do. So I can send everything on location. In this case, all the items that I set up are sale, so nothing needs to come back, so it can just be returned. But let's pretend that something was instead rental. So for example, the tools, I can leave this on location. And once I am done with the project, what I can do is that here I can be, let's say, done. So the project is on location. I know that CO today, the tools need to come back. This will be also expected back. As you can see, it will be here. So I can just book it again. And I can make the things that should re-enter. Let's say these are tools, these are rental. I can just book them back. And once I'm done, I can change the status because the project is returned, has been done. Everything about it is finished. And this is finished. And so the project now, this installation is finished. And we can continue with our normal work, whether it be sale projects or rental projects. And this, I believe, should be it from me. Do we have any questions, Parker, Bogdan?
We sure do, Axel. And now this question I'm about to ask, there is no right or wrong answer, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Okay.
As you know, the project statuses we have are mostly engineered for rental projects.
Indeed.
But what status would you give to a sales project that has been delivered and invoiced?
That would be, so with the statuses that we have, which, as you are right, that they are mostly for rental projects, they would be returned. Because returned in Rentman terms means this project is done, it needs no more attention, it's just closed. If this is not good enough for the sale project, depending, of course, on the workflows of the company, one thing that you could do, and this is true also for more in general, having, let's say, custom project statuses, is that you could have an extra input field where you can keep track of different statuses. So you can do this by going to configuration here, and then you can go to extra input fields here under settings, and you can add an extra input field belonging to project, or we can call it status, for example. And I would recommend using text because this is always editable. But if it's something that you want to set up once and then you are happy with how it is forever, so you never want to change it, because extra input fields cannot be edited except for the name and the group that they are part of after they're being created. You could also do, for example, a drop-down list with all the possible values you want. But at a later date, you will not be able to add new choices here. So do a drop down only if you're really sure. Otherwise, just have text. And this is something that you can use in searches if you wish, with a minimum search length. Let's create it. Now I need to refresh the page. And another thing that you can do, let's say let's go back to my project. So I added this to project, which means here it is. We can call this, let's say, closed or sold. I don't know. Let's say that's sold. Once this is inserted, what we can do is that we can add this to our overview, for example. So I can add a column and I can go down to the extra input fields section. I can add this one, which currently is the only project that has one, but let's pretend there's more. I can also then group by this. So I can see, excuse me, I can see all the projects that have this status and all the projects that have different statuses according to this extra input field that I made. So this would be one way of handling this.
Nice one. Yeah. Great. And the last question that I'm seeing here is from Oliver Smith. He's wondering how we can import a spreadsheet of sales items without the software automatically making them rental items.
Do you know if this is possible, Parker?
Well, I believe there's a column rental sales, and
okay.
To me it sounds like...
Is it importable? Because I'm not entirely sure. I know there is such a column.
I would say yes.
Okay, I would say yes as well. So what we can do here, we can try it right now. We can add this column to the overview. So it's so we see there's 3 rental, 3 sale items, and I will just try to export this so I can then re-import it. We want to export the columns visible, so also this rental sales one. Here it is. And now I'm going to re-import it again just to see if this is something that can be imported. So let's say that we are importing everything as new item. And this is the file that we will import. See, there's a number of columns. That should be the last one. It is something that can be imported. Perfect. So if you have this column here, rental sales, in your import sheet, you can give it the value of sale for your items. So it will already be imported as a sale item. And then you, of course, you just need to complete the various steps of the importing process.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Axel.
Yeah. Anything else?
I believe Bogdan is answering one last question, typing it out, but we can give it half a minute or so and see if any more come in.
Okay, I'll be drinking some more water in the meantime.
Yes, stay hydrated.
Yes, indeed. I see nothing coming in. So I think this, Parker, anything coming?
Yeah, no, I think we're all set here.
Okay, perfect. Then
thanks for hosting, Axel.
Oh, thanks for the help. Thank you everyone for joining. You will find this webinar on YouTube. Actually, let's go back to the presentation so I can. You can find this webinar on YouTube, on the blog, rentman.io/webinar, or via email as soon as the recording is available. If you have any more questions or doubts about this, you can also always contact us at support@rentman.io, or you can just give us a call or open a chat. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for joining. And I hope to see you all soon in our next series of webinar. Have a nice day.
Toodaloo.